For people that don't know who I am, I think a lot of people know me here, but Dr. Josh McConkey. I'm an emergency physician. Was a Duke professor for quite a few years here in North Carolina, and as a military commander as well up at Andrews Air Force Base. The first question I usually get is, where'd you get the title? And the second one is, why did you write the book? So I've been really fortunate in 23 years of service, prior Army, current Air Force, but I've worked with some special operators. And when you talk about tip of the spear, what's the tip of the spear? I've worked with combat search and rescue, pararescue, PJs, and these are the guys that kind of kick down doors. They rescue men and women down behind enemy lines, and when pilots get shot down. And some of these special operators have been on teams when you talk about taking down bin Laden, when you talk about rescuing the children of the Thai cave system in 2018, when those kids got trapped underground and everyone thought they were going to die. You pick up the bat phone, and this is who you call. So that's the tip of the spear. I don't take lives, I save lives, right? So my call to action here, that the whole title, Be the Weight Behind the Spear, is promoting community engagement. Like, get involved in your community, whether that's coaching. We got some coaches here. We have some military. How many veterans? 1, 2? Yeah, so the veterans here. Volunteers, mentors, and families. That's the weight behind the spear. Every one of these special operators, these guys are heroes, and every single one of them has a favorite coach or a teacher or somebody that gave them the amazing confidence to do what they do. It's pretty amazing. Just getting to work with these guys for a few years, it's very humbling. So this book, as an emergency doctor, what I've seen in our younger generation is a lot of suicides. I've seen the anxiety and the depression that really comes as a result, in Generation Z, and what I call the COVID generation. So these kids have been shut out of schools, shut out of churches, and the result that you see is just sometimes the inability to communicate some very simple things, lack of resiliency, and as a military commander, I see that on the military side as well. I've been concerned, so that's why I wrote the book. This is really a call to action. This is my prescription for that problem. And hopefully you get to pick up this generation. They're the leaders. You guys right here, they're the future of this country. Like, I'm gonna hand the keys. I don't have my car keys on. I'm gonna hand these keys to you in like 20 years. You guys gotta run this country. Do you think you're ready? Yeah, we're gonna get you ready. I say we have to take ownership of that as a country. Everybody here, teachers, coaches, volunteers, families, that's really important. And what you do every single day matters. And that's really what this book is all about. So do you have any questions to start? Any good questions, anybody? Got a question? Anything at all? You guys can ask me anything, wide open.
I might have to read the book, but for now.
All right. So I'm gonna do 2 readings. The first one is from the 2nd chapter. So the first reading is gonna be from the book on the leadership chapter, and then the 3rd chapter is on confidence of youth. So I'm glad there's some kids in the room, because you guys are going to have to solve the world's problems here very shortly. All right? So this reading is from chapter 2 on leadership. I learned other key components of leadership and team building from Coach Mike Krzyzewski, also known as Coach K, the legendary Duke basketball coach. I spent a few years as an assistant professor at Duke University, and the highlight of my time there was when Coach K himself gave a presentation on leadership to our residency program. It was residency recruiting season, and my initial thought was that he had been roped into a recruiting stunt for the university. While this still would have been very cool, within the first 10 minutes it became very apparent it wasn't a stunt, but the most incredible leadership presentation I would ever see. He asked not to be recorded. I couldn't get my phone out, so I was taking notes on the phone. I was scrambling to get all the notes down, and it was 2 hours of pure brilliance. He boiled his leadership style down to these simple traits: honesty, accountability, and ownership. He had such great stories, including those of coaching the 2008 Olympic basketball team. With all those superstars, all that talent, and the monster egos, we know them. LeBron James, Dwayne Wade, Kobe Bryant, and some pretty big names. So what Coach K did is he took them all to Ellis Island and the Statue of Liberty. He used this visit as an opportunity to challenge each of them. They had to get on an immigrant database, and they had to search for a family member, someone who had immigrated to this country. Search for a relative of their own. If you go back far enough, we're all immigrants unless you're Native American. So everyone had to find somebody. Even superstars making tens of millions of dollars a year have immigrant ancestors. Once each player found an ancestor, Coach K had them imagine what it was like to set foot in a foreign country. He had them think about what they had to do to survive, to be successful, and to leave a legacy for their own families. He had them imagine how proud that ancestor would be to see what they had become. He then had them write down the name of that family member who had the biggest impact on their lives, or maybe a grandparent, a parent, maybe a coach or volunteer. Once they had written this down, he played the national anthem right there on Ellis Island, looking at the Statue of Liberty. Coach K stood up when the last note struck and told them the next time they heard the Star-Spangled Banner, it would be as Americans competing for the United States of America, and that when, not if, they hung that gold medal around their necks, it was for that family member or that person who meant so much to them. That's incredible. The goosebumps when I heard him say it, it was unbelievable. His leadership points on ownership were also very meaningful. Everybody has a responsibility on his teams, whether making $25 million a year or a freshman at Duke University. Everybody has skin in the game and an ownership share. I hammered that home during my assumption of command speech when I took command at my squadron at Andrews Air Force Base in Washington, D.C. I told the team, this isn't my squadron. This is our squadron. And with that ownership comes honesty and accountability. The only way to get buy-in from others is to demonstrate ownership yourself. Whether it was scrubbing the occasional toilet or putting in late nights, taking ownership must be demonstrated by example. Another quality of good leadership is recognizing that to be successful and lead effectively, you must understand the personality traits of the people that you lead. In addition, you have to model those traits that you want to see in your people. Colonel Chris Hadfield, an astronaut, became the very first Canadian to command the International Space Station, summed up this philosophy simply and eloquently. And I love this term. Aim to be a zero. In his autobiography, An Astronaut's Guide to Life on Earth, What Going to Space Taught Me About Ingenuity, Determination, and Being Prepared for Anything, he spoke of this philosophy on staying humble but exceptionally competent. What does it mean to be a zero? As Colonel Hadfield explains, to be a zero, you have to understand what constitutes a +1 and a -1. Colonel Hadfield had a degree in mechanical engineering. He was an astronaut, so he's obviously quite brilliant. He broke down human personality types as they pertain to team dynamics by classifying them as 0, +1, or -1. The -1s are infamous. The people who don't pull their own weight, who show up late, who always have an excuse for why things don't get done. They are never responsible for their own failures, and they struggle to make decisions. They induce negative drag on a team. Most of us can't stand these kind of people. They can suck out your will to live if you let them and take up inordinate amounts of your time to keep them on task. We all know some -1s. This brings us to the +1s. How can you tell when someone is a +1? Don't worry, they'll tell you. These people who always raise their hands first and look around to make sure everyone else saw their hands go up first, these are the +1s. They want to make sure they get the credit and proudly boast at any given opportunity. These people may be gifted and intelligent, but they rub everyone the wrong way, and consequently, people don't want them on their team. You always know who these people are. I can still see the faces of some of these +1s from my college and medical school days, the endless questions that had no point except to illustrate to everyone how smart they were. Now this brings us to the 0. This is my favorite. The 0 is competent and professional. They don't need to dance around showing everyone how smart they are. If you give them a task, the 0 may ask a few questions for direction, but they will be direct and meaningful. The 0 is the humble professional and can come in a wide variety of personality types. They may be quiet outwardly, but they are an absolute assassin when it comes to conquering challenges. The only motivation they might need, questioning their ability, tell them they can't accomplish something and then watch them work. I absolutely love it when people tell me something is impossible. I feed on that. Nothing brings out the best of Americans as a people like a great challenge will. They might secretly be a +1 with intellect and proficiency, and they rise to become great teammates and value-added contributors. I'm sure this is what Billy Corgan shot for when he trademarked those famous Smashing Pumpkin shirts, the sharp black ones with the white contrasting 0 and a star. The star was to illustrate how great they were of a team player, I'm quite sure. If you're a rock star, you don't have to tell everybody. They will already know. Like the Fonz, author Fonzarelli. There's a few people out here who know that is, right? The Fonz, the fictional king of cool from the 1970s sitcom Happy Days. Everybody knew the Fonz was cool when he walked into a room. He never had to say a thing. So, that's some of my take on leadership. There's got to be some questions out here. I need some questions. Fire away. Any question?
I just got put on the spot.
Yeah, I love it. Anybody, come up with some questions. Questions on leadership, or questions about school, or growing up where you're going to school right now. Anybody? All right. Well, we can go to the second one. You guys come up with some questions. Anything you want.
I missed the intros.
Oh, well, there you go. I just talked about, weight behind the spear, why I wrote the book, and some of the concerns that I had as a military commander and as a physician. So I see anxiety, depression, and suicide. And as a military commander, the same cohort of Americans, they lack the accountability and some leadership skills and just basic resiliency skills. Concerned me enough that I wrote the book. So being the weight behind the spear is kind of picking this generation up, engaging your community and doing something about that, taking ownership.
Failure of the public education system or just deficiency?
Yeah, it's a combination of a lot of things. Certainly, the education system has changed a lot since I was a kid. I went to school in the 80s and 90s. It's changed a lot. My wife's a teacher. My mom and aunt are teachers, and I think a lot of times we have not empowered our teachers to keep these kids accountable. The stories I get from my mom, she physically can't fail anybody. Like for the last 10 years of her career before she retired, you can't fail anybody. You have to give them like at least a C or a D, and that's zero accountability. And so you wonder why some of this generation struggles. You can't hold their feet to the fire. That's probably a big one right there. And everyone's not a winner. Okay, some of this generation, they vote. Everyone gets a prize. Everybody gets a ribbon. Everyone gets a trophy. That's not real life. There's winners and there's losers. And it's not a harsh reality. It's reality, and you don't do them any justice. You got lawnmower parents. You got the helicopter parents. You're not doing your kids any justice, and you're not giving them the resiliency skills that they need to be successful. So, this is my prescription for the problem. Other questions?
Well, I heard the first question you asked, like a question about leadership.
Yeah.
My name is Angel. I'm 26-year-old. I have a 4-year-old.
Thanks, Angel.
Me and my wife, together. My background is construction. I'm a journeyman. Just kind of recently have taken some leadership positions.
Nice.
I guess my question is, when you take leadership positions, do you always have to be like 100% ready?
No. That's a great question. Do you have to be 100% ready when you take a leadership position? Nobody is 100% ready, and nobody is born with those skills. In 23 years in the military, I have seen horrific leadership. I've seen fantastic leadership and a lot in between, and you take something away. So when you define leadership, like how do you recognize a good leader? Sometimes that's difficult for people to really describe until they've had a bad leader. So you point out a bad leader and you instantly recognize what good leadership is. Don't micromanage. Put good people in place, recognize good talent, and you have to own that as a leader. If you're not choosing good people and you're having to micromanage them, then you own that. You did make a good decision, and they probably should not be in your leadership chain. You got to find somebody else. So that falls on you as a leader, and you learn from people, and you won't be perfect the first time, and you're going to make mistakes. There's nothing wrong with that. So you do not have to be 100% ready. You just have to be present and willing to learn. Don't have a big ego, and learn from people. And that's the biggest thing. So that's awesome. Great question. Any other questions, guys? Okay. So the next chapter, the next reading here is from chapter 3. And this is certainly a very fun chapter because we have some kids in the room here, and you guys are our future. Right back here. You're going to lead this country in about 20 years?
Totally.
Yes? Yes, you are. Maybe 15 years. Who knows? I got to hand the keys over to you guys. Got to have you ready. So this is from the chapter Confidence of Youth. Outside military conflicts, perhaps our nation's biggest challenge was the race to put man on the moon. John F. Kennedy's 1962 address in Houston regarding the space race was the public call to action following his 1961 speech to the joint session of Congress on May 25th. He said, "First, I believe that this nation should commit itself to achieving the goal, before this decade is out, of landing a man on the moon and returning him safely to Earth." President Kennedy's call to action did more than motivate a nation. It laid the foundation for a generation of America's youth that followed and set an example of thinking outside the box and challenging limitations of what was possible in space and elsewhere. The Apollo space program was a huge undertaking. Apollo 11 was the mission that became famous when, on July 20th, 1969, a man stepped onto the moon for the first time during a live television broadcast. To celebrate the 50th anniversary of Apollo 11 moon landing, the British Broadcasting Company produced a podcast, 13 Minutes to the Moon, in 2019. It's notable for a fantastic compilation of interviews from the people who took part in the launch. Season 1 chronicled the challenges and events that saved the nearly disastrous Apollo 11 landing and the people involved who made that landing happen. Episode 11 features the final 13 minutes of recordings from the astronauts and the mission control team as the lunar module made its descent to the moon's surface. It's breathtaking, like the actual conversations they were having. It's fantastic. Season 2 chronicled the events and incredible survival of the astronauts on the infamous Apollo 13 mission, which nearly ended in tragedy after an explosion took place shortly after the crew reached space. The interviews with the astronauts themselves are some of the most priceless examples of human endurance and resolve ever recorded. The challenges they faced and the way the mission control team responded is perhaps the biggest story of human ingenuity in the face of adversity in American history. While the world watched anxiously, the Apollo 13 crew returned safely to Earth, fighting incredible odds. Critical to the success of these missions and behind the scenes were the men and women in mission control during launch. Mission control was ultimately responsible for the operation, safety, and life support functions, and the chief flight director was the only one who gave no-go or no-go orders for launch. What is most impressive about the Apollo program was the average age of the Apollo mission control team. So this is the control team that put man on the moon. Let me get some guesses. What was the average age of these kids? It's close. Close. 27 years old. You put man on the moon right now. You're 26 years old. That's crazy. And that's what this chapter is all about. In today's world, jobs of this importance would have a room full of 30 or 40-something-year-old veteran rocket scientists. However, this young team was responsible for executing one of mankind's most daunting challenges, handling a total combined budget of over $25 billion, which today is $165 billion, at 26, 27 years old. It's hard to imagine the responsibility and pressures this team was under. Not only was the entire world watching, but they also faced mounting political pressure and the responsibility for 3 lives strapped into a rocket every time they hurled it towards the moon. It's pretty mind-boggling. One individual was a 26-year-old mission control specialist by the name of Steve Bales, described by flight director Gene Kranz as the original computer nerd. This guy was the first. He had owl-rimmed glasses and a baby face. Steve was from small-town Iowa, a town of 500 people. He became interested in the space program after watching a Disney special in the 1950s. A Disney special. The Disney special planted a seed in his imagination, which germinated and was nurtured by families and teachers. Steve decided to pursue a degree in engineering, and at the age of 26, faced one of the most critical decisions in NASA's history, a real tip of the spear type moment on the mission control team. There were only seconds to go before the most famous landing in the history of mankind when the team encountered a 1202 alarm code. Neil Armstrong relayed the code to message control with uncharacteristic urgency. Everyone in the room looked to Steve Bales, the 26-year-old kid. What did this alarm code mean? Was it critical enough to abort the moon landing? The entire mission and the lives of the astronauts rested on his hands. Steve's job was to understand the computer systems and alarm codes, the onboard computer with less computing power than the phones that we carry in our hands today. So everybody, just take out your phone and look at it. Like, more computing power than what put man on the moon. Without proper computer functioning, the landing could not happen, and everyone knew it. With the alarm code flashing and the ever-present memory of the loss of the Apollo 1 crew not far from their minds, the suspense in mission control could not be overstated. Ask yourself, what were you doing when you were 26 years old? Would you have been able to handle that kind of pressure? When I was 26 years old, I was an intern doctor in Akron, Ohio, and petrified by my first night on call. I was responsible for making decisions that could possibly kill someone. If I made a mistake with a medication dosage or misinterpreted an EKG, it would have disastrous effects. But I always had a senior resident or attending physician to call for guidance. The biggest decision I had was whether or not to call for help. Don't be afraid to call for help. There was also the additional backup from experienced nursing staff who were always on the prowl for dumb intern orders. These nurses were always prepared to rescue the patients from certain death. Even though one of my mistakes could have disastrous consequences, the system was set up to help me and guide me to the correct answer, unless I was too foolish to recognize my own limitations. So as a professor at Duke, this is what I would talk to with residents all the time. This is one of my sayings: doctors don't kill people. Idiot doctors who don't know their limitations kill people. At that moment, in mission control, Steve Bales had no such backup. There was nobody to bail him out. The entire mission rested on his guidance and interpretation of these computer alarms. Luckily, Steve Bales had the confidence of youth. He wasn't afraid to take on tasks that had never been done before. He wasn't paralyzed by fear or realized that he couldn't do it. So he just did it. So that's you guys. Steve Bales' story serves as an incredible example of why investment in our youth is so critical to the future of our nation. Steve Bales later described how some people would hem and haw over decisions, asking themselves if they should do this or that. He didn't have the luxury of time. He made the decision, and the result is literally history. The lunar module landed safely onto the moon with Neil Armstrong's iconic words, "That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind." The weight behind Steve's spear came from friends, family, and teachers in rural Iowa. When Americans take the time to be the weight behind the spear and ask the next generation to solve the problems of the future, which many times was created by that earlier generation, we have to believe they can do it because they believe that things can't be solved, and it empowers them to think outside the box. The confidence of youth allows their minds to work differently, to freely come up with solutions that older colleagues might not fathom. They aren't jaded by prior experiences nor by the limitations and unrecognized biases that handcuff the older generation. Every single child in this country is potentially the next Steve Bales or the next Neil Armstrong. So that's pretty powerful, very, very powerful. But that's what we expect of you guys. Because in the 60s, not much older than you put man on the moon. It's quite insane when you actually think about that age. Oh my goodness. So, you guys got some other questions? In fact, here, let me pass this around as well. So this is my leadership coin. So you kind of pass this around, you kind of take a look at that. But on the bottom of this, kind of hand it around to everybody. There's a Latin inscription on the bottom of there, gravitate hastum, Latin, gravity of the spear, be the weight behind the spear. So that coin is what I give to men and women like under my command that have done extraordinary things or have stepped up and demonstrated great leadership. And then on the back of the coin, it kind of sums up some of my military career, having flown, medevac in Iraq and then worked with combat search and rescue on the Air Force side of things. I've been super blessed in my career and have had a tremendous weight behind my spear. We got some of those people in the room here right now. So all of you guys, thank you very much for being the weight behind my spear. And so I need you guys to step up. America needs you. What you do every single day matters. That's the best resource we have in this country. It's our people. It's coaches, teachers, volunteers, mentors, and families. That's what sets us apart. When China and Russia get in a little room and commiserate how they're going to take down the world, they fear our people. That resource, like our non-commissioned officer corps that we have in the military, no one else on the planet has that. Our ability to think outside the box. You ask what won us World War II, that generation is our non-commissioned officer corps. China doesn't have it. Russia does not have it. The failures in Ukraine when they invaded were so blatantly obvious. Their lack of leadership in the NCO Corps is what doomed them, and that's what they fear. So let's come up with some questions. Any other questions? Yes.
What would you recommend to younger people of how to start, learning leadership and different skills that they could work on?
Yeah. So the first thing's right there, being part of a team, like team sports, learning that leadership, being part of a team, making decisions together, winning, losing together. There's great chapters in the book of my coaches, and wrestling was a great sport for me. The ultimate accountability. There's nobody else to blame. It's just you and one other dude on a mat, and you were either faster and stronger or better, or you weren't. Nobody dropped a pass. Nobody missed a play. It's just you or them, and that ultimate accountability, and that's what sports provides. When you don't work hard enough, or sometimes they are just better than you, that loss, there's nothing wrong with losing. If you're not losing, you're probably not pushing yourself hard enough, or you're not playing. You need to play some better teams and make yourself better, because at some point you are going to lose. There's always somebody faster. There's always somebody stronger. Unless you're winning a gold medal in the Olympics, there's always somebody better than you, and you have to push yourself. So there's nothing wrong with losing. It's a great motivator. Fear of losing is a fantastic motivator. I hate losing. It's a great motivator. But starting off with those, and then getting involved with other organizations, like your churches, your schools, animal shelters. I mean, everybody has something different to give. Everybody has a different skill set. Like, not everybody's the same. Like, whatever you enjoy, everybody has something to give, and that makes a difference. Like, what you do every single day matters. It's a good question. Other questions? Bobby.
I got one for you.
Yes.
So kind of piggybacking on that, and then also similarly, when I was in high school, we had a foreign exchange student from Finland who said that as soon as he graduated, he had to go a minimum of 1 year of service before he continued his life as an adult.
Yeah.
Probably not good to blanketly do that, but would you recommend, like, a high school graduate commit to the minimum enlistment just to get a feel for the teamwork, the taking orders, the building skills like that?
The discipline and being part of a team, there's nothing like it. When I stepped away from the military between my Army and my Air Force service time, that whole almost 2 years, I felt like I was sitting on the sidelines, so it just becomes a part of you. The military is certainly not for everybody, but for people that have, just like some of the physical and mental makeup, there's a large percent of America that can't physically serve for one reason or another. There's a lot of mental health issues and things as well that'll keep people out. But if you have an opportunity and that desire, I would very much encourage that, because it teaches you about the overall picture. When you put that uniform on, I mean, you're literally saying that you're willing to step up and take a bullet for this country. And it's, especially like with Veterans Day coming up here, that's a pretty special thing. And for the veterans out here, I want to thank you guys for your service. It means a lot to me. And that's the thing that I'm most proud of professionally that I've done was military service. The biggest pride is with my family here today. That's the thing I'm most proud of. But yeah, great question. If you've got the opportunity. Any other questions? Do you have a question? I think Gabriel had a question. I saw you waving your hand. Well, thanks for being here, everybody. This is, did you come up with questions? No? All right. Well, thanks a lot for being here. If you guys know some veterans, thank them for their service. You know, it's a pretty special day for me. I've served with a lot of men and women, a lot of real heroes. Never considered myself a hero at all. I've just got to work as part of those teams, and it's I take a lot of pride in that. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. So thanks for being here today, guys. If you guys want a book signed, come on up. I've got bookmarks as well. So come on up and say hello.